Welcome to this episode of Words and Power. This is going to be a quick one for Women's History Month. This one featuring Ericka Huggins, member of the LA chapter. I'm going to start this out.
There were billboards in Texas that said, "Join the LAPD." How do I know? Because party members who were friends of mine told me that. That's what they saw. Every person who ever visited Los Angeles thought that the LAPD were like a spinoff of the Ku Klux Klan. I'd never seen a police force like this. And I'm certain that in some ways it's changed just because it has to, but I'm certain that it hasn't changed in its entirety. But it did seem to me that there were always people being stopped and beaten, being arrested for no reason. It just seemed that in the neighborhoods I lived in Los Angeles, it always felt like an armed camp. As a matter of fact, I can remember at one point living in Los Angeles that when tanks came down the streets and when there were police lining the streets like armed guards, not even during the time of a riot, I mean just in general, it's just like occupied territory in the black community. And I'm sure that other cultural groups were treated as poorly, but all I could see was the way in which black and brown people were treated in the communities that I lived in. There was always an attack of some kind. And of course you know that the Black Panther Party was always about self-defense if there was an attack. So that the way that the LAPD looked at the Black Panther Party was as if we'd lost our minds.
I think that's a good intro to who Ericka Huggins is. She was a part of the LA chapter along with Elaine Brown. And in her breakdown of the LAPD, her experiences with the LAPD, you hear the motivation for her joining the Panther Party, the motivation for them starting the Panther Party. Because when you hear Huey and Bobby Seale talk about the police force in Oakland, you get a similar story of the police being seen or kind of moving and operating like an occupying force, like an occupying army, to be more exact. And the description she gave of just random everyday policing of tanks and other forms of terrorism, still goes on today, more so now. You're hearing police departments getting all this funding for pretty much just militarized police forces. Police forces getting all this funding to be militarized. You saw that in Ferguson. You see that with the weaponry they have. You see the little tanks they have. The Israeli army is training the New York police force. I mean, and this was going on before she joined the party. So it kind of shows you the history of militarizing and occupying black communities, or occupying black communities with a militarized force. All right, so her name, she was born Ericka Jenkins in Washington, D.C., January 5th, 1948. She became a member of the LA chapter, joined in 1968, where she ended up meeting the man who would eventually become her husband, John Huggins. I'm going to play this clip here of her explaining her involvement in the Panther Party. This is a clip from a daytime kind of news interview show in the 80s that was done, I think, shortly after Huey P. Newton's death. This particular segment was called Women of the Panther Party, if I'm not mistaken. And on this particular episode was Ericka Huggins, Angela Davis, and another woman whose name escapes me right now. I will probably have that flashing right here or something in post.
I was a junior at Lincoln University, and I was 18 years old. And I read a Ramparts magazine article in which Huey was pictured strapped to a hospital gurney with a policeman standing over him laughing. Huey had a stomach wound, a gunshot wound in his stomach. And on the day when I read that article, I wondered what I was doing in college and why wasn't I out there supporting him and supporting black people. And so within a week, my friend and I, John Huggins and I, who later became my husband and was later killed by the FBI at UCLA in 1969, drove across country to aid in freeing Huey Newton. We joined the party shortly after we got to Los Angeles, and I worked with it from that time until 1981.
Yes, in that telling of her involvement in the party, you kind of see kind of the levels of violence that they had to deal with. I mean, they were, one of their inspiring moments to join the party was a moment of violence. The famous pic of Huey strapped or handcuffed down to the gurney after being shot in the stomach, I believe, in the gut, I should say. And to see that and to be motivated to join his cause and join his movement, I wonder if she would be too shocked to find herself later surrounded in violence. When unfortunately her husband was murdered a year or so later in 1969. He and the leader of the LA chapter, Bunchy Carter, murdered by members of the US movement, headed by Ron Karenga, founder of Kwanzaa, the Great Black Christmas, and so you kind of see what she had to deal with in the efforts just to try to get black freedom, and she was also a member and founder of the New Haven chapter of the Black Panther Party, which eventually led to a particular trial, the New Haven trial. Let me look that up here. She had to deal with after the murder of her husband. Yeah, so the New Haven trial, a Panther named Alex Rackley, if I'm saying his name right, was killed by fellow Panthers Warren Kimbrough, Lonnie McLucas, and George Sams Jr. I believe I read in Momia's autobiography that that man, George Sams Jr., was actually an informant himself. These Panthers suspected that Rackley was an informant, and they ended up beating that man to death. So they, including Bobby Seale, who happened to be in New Haven at a particular time, along with Ericka Huggins, were all put on trial. It's a famous Panther trial. And yeah, she really went through the fire as a member of the Panther Party.
Well, for instance, at the 77th Street Police Precinct station where Elaine Brown and Joan Kelly and many of us were taken after John and Bunchy were killed, there was a little sign up that, you know, like a board with white letters that you could stick on it. You know, those old-fashioned bulletin boards? And it said, Panther 0, Pigs 11. Now, what kind of human beings are these that keep track of murdering as if it was a ball game? So Tommy Smith, Steve Bartholomew, and Robert Lawrence were 3 of that 11 in Los Angeles. That's what I remember about that.
Yeah, there's another clip from this documentary that she is featured in. And she's talking about seeing this kind of tracker in the LAPD, kind of in LAPD's offices or precinct, I don't know what they're called. I remember Elaine Brown talked about that in her book. Heard Ericka mention that Elaine Brown was there. And yeah, she's talking about the LAPD and the sickness that went into their pursuit of the Panthers, and yeah, it was just it was a crazy experience, and kind of showing you who their ops were, so to speak, in this particular situation, and how insane they really were, and dedicated to savagely, violently destroy the Panthers if need be. But yeah, still she persisted, as they say.
Harriet Tubman once said that he is not a slave who strikes a blow for freedom. And I've never forgotten that. And what I feel about all of what we did was that we allowed for people to raise their consciousness, their understanding of themselves. And in a way, that understanding was a surface understanding, but the language changed. The way that black people carried themselves changed. What I felt was that something transforming was happening in the hearts and minds of people. Whenever change is occurring, it doesn't taste good. It's not necessarily pleasant, but in effect the result is quite wonderful. I would say also that things are similar today. You know, those things are similar that were happening then. Mm-hmm. But I also have to say that I know because of the Black Panther Party, not only did my life change, but my mother's life changed, my sister's life, my brother's life. All of the people that I knew, whether I knew them well or not, their lives changed dramatically because a stand was being made. We were saying, yes, there was an Emancipation Proclamation, but it was a piece of paper. Now we have to really become free of those bonds, and we're willing and courageous enough to do it. And Huey was very, very courageous man.
In this clip, she talks about the legacy of the Black Panther Party, the sense of pride that instilled in herself, generations before her, after her. Yeah, I can see that, and I can, see that happening today. At least during the beginnings of the Black Lives Matter movement, there was a lot of seemed to be a lot of pro-black activity, a lot of pride in being black, so much so that they passed a black extremist law, black extreme identity. I got the exact term. Yeah, the FBI calls it black identity extremism. That's how pro-black we've become now, right? But yeah, seeing people rise up for people who look like you, people who come from your lineage, I can see that definitely instilling a bit of pride in you. Gives you hope. Yeah, that's it for Ericka Huggins for this particular episode of Panther Words and Power, featuring Ericka Huggins.